Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Barry Smith.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm Paul Gustafson, and I'm sitting down with my good friend, Barry Smith. Barry, so good to be here with you, man. How are you?
Always, my friend. This is just another great topic, another great guy to speak into, another great leader. And I'm looking forward to today's call with you, my friend.
Yeah, so let's just do a quick review here, right? So we started off with season 6. Here we are, season 6. We started off with early Jordan, right? College day, North Carolina. That was our number one thing, right? That's what we started with. And then our second one was Jackie Robinson.
Yep.
And here we are in baseball season as we record this, which is cool. And then we did 1980 Winter Olympics, U.S. men's hockey. And then we did Tom Brady. And I like the football, right? Because I like football all year long. I got to be honest with you.
I'm with you, man.
I mean, I really do. I get into the combine stuff just a little bit just because I want to see who's there. I get into the draft, like who's the talent there. I love seeing the stories of, the kids who've just put in and put all that effort and they've made it to that spot. And, many of them, nothing was easy for them. They worked hard for that, and then they get drafted that night. And I feel bad for the other ones. My wife is friends with one of the players for the Bears, and I remember the story of just waiting and waiting and waiting till like day 3 until he was drafted by the Bears. And I think he still plays for him. He's a safety, but yeah, it's just wild just hearing all those stories. But today we're going to continue the football discussion.
Yes.
One of the great coaches of the day. And I'm looking at our list, right? This is the only coach. I mean, even though we talked about coaches in episode 1 with Jordan, talking about Dean Smith, and then on Georgetown with John Thompson, this is the first coach that we just like, okay, let's center in on the coach.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about this.
And there's some good ones, and I love how you kind of brought the NFL draft into this. As we record this, the draft was only a couple weeks ago, and just phenomenal stories. And again, you hear not just about the player and the talents, but the character. And I think that's an interesting topic for our subject of today, because definitely a man of character, definitely someone who used character as a way to judge players he'd bring onto his team, and definitely values that he shared with his teammates. But yeah, coaches are mentors, right? We've had the conversation about coaching, mentoring, training, and the differences that are there, but coaches are mentors and definitely play a huge role in the players that they coach as a mentor. And this guy was probably one of the best. I think if you asked anybody who played for him, and just like any coach at his level, dealt with a lot of different personalities, a lot of different value sets, let's just say. And yet he just wanted to be a guy to add value, make a difference, support his players, and do what he could to pour into them. And he definitely did a good job at that. And he's taken that into another sport.
He has
since then. And we'll probably get into that a little bit as well.
It's going to be fun. So, guys, if you haven't guessed by now, we're talking about the infamous, famous Hall of Famer, Joe Jackson Gibbs. So this is probably one of the few, I'm not far from Washington. They renamed their team. Won't get into that conversation. But, one of the highlights as we look back, in retrospect and the hindsight and the glory days of Washington football, this guy is in the middle of it, right? He's in the middle of it. Now, we had Vince Lombardi for a year. We had others, George Allen. We've had others, but Joe Jackson Gibbs stands out, clearly stands out, because he's the only coach to take a team to the Super Bowl 4 times, winning it 3 times, but with three different quarterbacks.
And not only did you have him once, you had him twice.
We did. And then Joe Gibbs 2.0. So we can talk about that, right? So when you look at the Dan Snyder era, let's just get into it. Elephants in the room. Dan Snyder. I'm not going to bash Dan, but it's clear, right? Let the record show we've only won 1 playoff game since Dan Snyder has bought the team. And hopefully by the time that this is aired, it's clear that Josh Harris, the owner of the Sixers and also the New Jersey Devils, has got the team. He's the new owner of it. But Joe Gibbs, in the struggle period early on in the Dan Snyder era, Dan was able to somehow persuade Joe to come out of retirement. Now, Joe, at that point, had already launched a brand new career, and you've already mentioned it. Yeah. At least you alluded to it. You want to share what that was?
Yeah, you bet. So definitely Gibbs had a great assistant career playing under some greats like Don Coryell and others. Started with the Redskins as their head coach in 81, ran through 92. And he said, you know what, my passion maybe just lies somewhere else. And if I'm going to do something, I'm going to be all in. And I can't be all in on 2 big things. And in 1992, he started Joe Gibbs Racing. And he's been very successful there, continues to be successful in that era with Joe Gibbs Racing. And, as we mentioned, he did come back out, but he leveraged who he had there with him, his kids, and some other key members that he could delegate and trust to run the racing, so he could come back and run a few more years with the Redskins at the time, right? Now it's weak. Yeah, I said it. I said Redskins. Hey, that's who they were back then. But yeah, came back in 2004, I think 2004 to 2007, if I remember right, for kind of second run. But here's a guy who, big decision. I'm sure that was a huge decision. And what's a decision, right? Is a choice. I love this topic when I get in this, talking about choices and decisions, and words kind of get used interchangeably at times, but to me, there's a big difference. The choice is which way we go. We haven't made that decision yet. We've got to make a choice. Yeah. And he had the choice of, do I stay with football and start up the racing, or do I have to give football up? And he made the choice. Then he made the decision to say, no, if I'm going to be doing something, I'm going to be all in. Can't do both. And so he stepped away from football, ran racing for a while, another more than a decade, and then just, missed the sports, missed the football part of it, and jumped back in. And, it wasn't quite the same story as the first run, but just a great guy, just what a legacy he's left in Washington, the impact he's had, not only on the players he's coached, but, I think the fan base there, obviously you're a fan, and I know, how can you not like the guy? He's just an incredible man, incredible leader.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Great story. He's not cut from he didn't play in the NFL, but he had that mind that you needed. He coached as an assistant under Coach Coryell, Coryell. And if you go back and you can see differentiation, right? So as a leader, like whether you're into sports or not, recognize the fact that there's an opportunity for differentiation in whatever you do. And I think that for Joe Gibbs, he was the one who came up with putting the team in motion the way they did, right? The shift sets and just the adjustments that were made before the ball, while the quarterback was behind center, having the team go in motion and creating that motion and movement. He started that in San Diego with Dan Fouts, and had some great receivers, and of course that was under Coryell, but the mastermind behind that was this young genius in Joe Gibbs.
Absolutely.
And then he comes over to the Washington football team, and Barry started off 0-5.
Yes, he did. And what happened after that?
He stuck with the game plan. He made some adjustments, but he essentially stuck with the game plan. This was like a Ted Lasso moment. The team believed, like, okay, and the city believed. We didn't give up on him. The owner didn't give up on him, and they came through. I can't remember what the record was at the end of the year.
Management actually predicted it. I can't remember if it was the owner or the GM, but actually said, "No, I believe in my guy, and he's going to finish this season 8-8, and that's exactly what he did. Finished out the season 8-3, I guess, to get to 8-8, and that was just beginning. He only had in that first 12 year. No, I think in all 14, 15 years he only had one losing season with Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, just a heck of a run for him. 3 Super Bowls, man, 8 years in the playoffs, 4 NFC championships. One of the only black marks in that was losing to my Raiders in the Super Bowl. So I'll take.
I remember that.
I'll take a little victory in that one. But hey, if you're going to lose to somebody, might as well be the Raiders, right? I mean, come on.
Who was the linebacker for the Raiders that caught that ball from Theismann?
Wyrick.
Yeah. And then Marcus Allen had that incredible run where he's going to get stopped, and then he just does a U-turn and goes around the other way. And I don't know if he ran it in, but he had a long run, man. It was amazing.
Little line back around and downfield.
Yeah. But that's Raiders, and Raiders have had glory days for sure. And
we need to get some of those back, as does Washington.
Yeah. So, but again, this isn't just about football, guys. Right? The NASCAR thing.
Yeah.
He grew up in North Carolina. I guess really had that bug for vehicles. But one of the reasons why he did that is he wanted to get closer to his sons, his family, and really do something with them. They helped build his car. I say empire in a loose way, right? Not necessarily in an evil way. It's because he's so gracious. He's so kind. Check this out, Barry. When he came back, Joe Gibbs 2.0, Dan Snyder brings him back. They've got an interview. This is 2004. It's preseason. They're at camp, and all the reporters are there, and everybody's there. It's like, whoa, wow, Joe Gibbs. So I mean, all the reporters are there. And then he sees, and I don't know the full story, but you can see a clip. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. He sees some handicapped kids that have come to visit the camp, and he catches wind of it, finds out who they are, and he says, "Guys, wait a second. There's a group here that really needs. This is why we do this, and I'm just going to have to call this press release. We're going to have to call this early because I want to spend time with these guys. They're special. They deserve my attention. This is why we do what we do." And you could see him graciously leave. Oops, I just knocked my water off the table. Graciously leave the press room. It was outdoors, actually. And he goes over there and attends to that. And that just spoke volumes to so many of us. Like, okay, he cares about people. It's all about relationships.
It is. And he's the type of guy. I did not know that story, but it does not surprise me at all. That's the kind of guy he was. And I think he did that at all levels, not just in that situation, but with his team, with his family. We were kind of chatting before we got started like we usually do. And I know that he lost both his sons, right? But between his sons, he got 8 grandkids. And so now he's got those, some of them involved in the business. And I just think about, you and I both have sons, right? You got 2 sons. I got 2 sons. I got 2 stepsons. Just to think about the legacy. And now that I got 2 grandsons, right? It's that legacy and the impact that we have on those around us, right? And what do we do? You made a comment, I think when we were talking this morning, in a different space, in a different place, and just how our actions can be so important for those around us, and I just think about my kids and my grandkids. We were just with them last weekend, and I look at them, and they're growing up so fast, and I already see them pushing the envelope on what means, what yes means and what no means. And it's like, all right, how do I take a challenging situation with a 2.5-year-old and try and make it a learning experience. So
Yeah.
it's, life is challenging, but life is fun, man. It's just, without challenges, we'd have no victories, right? And how appropriate that is when we're talking about sports. You've got to be able to overcome a challenge to have that victory. And man, Gibbs has done it in several different levels and many different ways, and certainly in multiple sports. And that's just the kind of guy he was. And I think, to me, and you referenced it, I think his book earlier, Game Plan for Life, which I read, almost a decade ago, but I still, without remembering the specifics, I just remember my takeaway, even a decade later, without even picking that book up, is just this guy had a strong value system and cared about people. One of the things, one of his quotes that people use, looking for players with character and ability, but remember, character comes first. And I think that's the way he ran his life, just, again, looking at choices and making decisions. He was a guy of character. We think about all the athletes, all the people in the limelight out there, and man, most of them got some kind of baggage. I'm not aware of anything, that anybody's ever picked on Joe Gibbs about for something where he kind of crossed the line. And, that's just kind of the way he rolled. A lot of respect for that guy.
Tons of respect. He brought in, I can't remember if he was a draft or a free agent guy, but a guy named Joe Jacoby.
Loved Jacoby.
Big guy, 6'6", Joe knew, like, okay, wait a minute. One of his quotes, you shared a quote that was pretty powerful. Here's another one. He says, a winning effort begins with preparation.
Love that one.
And he would do that all year round. He didn't wait till the week of, before the Cowboys or whatever team they're playing. He did that well in advance. And it was started with choosing those players of character that you just mentioned. So Joe Jacoby, he sees potential in somebody that everybody else thought, oh, this guy will never make it. He was like, wait a minute. I can coach. We can train him. We can teach him some capabilities. The physicality of this player is somebody I need to protect this line. And so he became one of the stalwarts on that offensive line. He realized it's not about the quarterback, although I want a good one. It's about that offensive line. It's about the running backs, protection. I need tight ends that can block, tight ends that can move, tight ends that can catch, offensive line that can block. And if I take care of my quarterback, we're going to be fine. We're going to be good. And he had good receivers. And so I was talking to Gary Clark. You ever heard of Gary Clark?
Oh, yeah.
So I saw last game I went to, which was right before COVID. I took my brother. He had never been to a professional football game.
What?
So it was the Giants against the Washington football team. And we're there a little bit early, and we're on the side of the field, outside, just right outside the stadium, and inside the gate, but not yet in the stands. And they look at me and my brother, and they said, "Hey, we got Gary Clark over here at the VIP tent. There's really not much of anybody. You want to say hi to Gary?" I'm like, "Yeah, you bet." So my brother and I go over to talk to Gary. Gary went to James Madison. And just a great receiver, played with Art Monk and Gary Sanders. And so we had a great conversation with Gary, and his love for Joe Gibbs was just clear in that discussion as we talked about his glory days. And he said, because there was one moment, you'll find it again on YouTube, where he's going at Joe Gibbs. He's mad at something. I don't know what it is. It's one little moment. We all have that, right? Emotional intelligence may have left our body, and he had that one moment. And Joe maintains his EQ. And he said, yeah, you know, that moment, I'm sometimes embarrassed by it, but in other ways, I couldn't have asked for a better coach.
Yeah.
He let me at least hear my complaints, my gripe. And because of that, we were able to move on. He was the best coach I've ever had. I can't imagine a better coach than Joe Gibbs. You know, and so that speaks volumes when you hear that from these different players. Clint Didier, I met him. He's a tight end, and I talked to him, and he was showing off all his. He's got the 3 rings, and again, it's Joe Gibbs, right? If it wasn't for the coach and the coaching staff that believed in us, that's where it starts. They believed in us because nobody else believed in us. Right? I mean, we weren't the top picks in the draft. Some of us were free agents. Some of us were defensive players that got converted to an offensive line like Joe Jacoby. But here's somebody that believes in us, sees the value that we can bring, gets clear on those values, designs a game plan. And our job is just to figure out how to execute that. But we believe in him because he believed in us. And I thought that was pretty powerful. We believed in him because he believed in us.
You just mentioned game plan, right? And I know I don't remember exactly what the quote is, but there's a Theismann quote where he talks about a game plan. And it's not just, you can't just take the game plan. As a coach, obviously you come up with the game plan, right? But you can't just go into the locker room, write it up on the blackboard and say, okay, guys, there it is. Go get them. Right? You got to explain it to them. You got to sell them on it, right? You got to give them ownership in it. You got to get their buy-in. And then you send them out on the field. When you do that, you send them out on the field in confidence. And I think that's part of why he is the only NFL coach to win Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. You know, he's got Rippon, he's got Theismann, he's got Doug Williams. You know, great quarterback. Theismann's a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? You know, you get some great quarterbacks in there.
Yeah.
But quarterbacks don't win on their own. They just don't. You know, we talked about Brady on the last podcast and just that competitive element and building a team around you. Brady's goal, you know, if somebody said, what do you think Tom Brady's #1 goal is, you know, will always be, you know, my response to that would be making the people better around him. And I think Gibbs brought that, probably brings that into NASCAR. Now, I'm not a big NASCAR guy, but I'm sure he brings those same elements into that sport as well. But getting the best out of people, putting the right people, you know, we hear the expression, you know, get the right people on the bus and get them in the right seats. And I think maybe that's a great, accurate way to explain how Joe Gibbs coached. You know, he did. I think that was his gift, finding the right people and getting them, you know, like you said, you know, defense going offense going to defense, make some changes, get them in the right seats. And I think that was a big part of his success. And not just in sports, you know, we haven't really got into the personal side of it. But, you know, I know he's that same guy. Obviously, he's the guy strong in faith, very strong in faith. And again, not trying to push that on any of our listeners, but that was important to him. That gave him a foundation, right? Everybody's got to find a foundation in something. And he found his in his faith. And certainly that worked for him at a high level. And it gave him filters on, again, evaluating some of those choices and the decisions he made. So again, just a stand-up guy, you know, like you said, you don't win with X's and O's, you win with people. And, you know, that's probably one of my favorite quotes, because, you know, I'm all about people and how important that is. And you're right. You don't win with X's and O's. They're part of it, part of the equation, no doubt about that. But you win with people.
You win with people. And so when I saw him a few years ago, you were talking about, you know, just a phenomenal book, Game Plan for Life, before we turn on the recording. So this is the Joe Gibbs book.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
So I got Joe signed it twice, actually. Oh, he signed it on the front cover and there. That's cool. All right. So this is a good book, you know, and he's a person of faith. So let's be real, guys. And he sees it's more than football, right? It's the impact that we can make with while the time that we're here on this earth, but knowing where we're going to end up. And so there's definitely a faith aspect to it. So I don't want to discount that at all. But what was really interesting when he spoke at that event, he had somebody introduce him. And usually when they bring in somebody to introduce, first of all, he came to Fredericksburg, and it's one of the first times where he didn't ask for a speaker fee. He said, look, I feel compelled. There's a message I want to share to this community. And everybody got activated. They got the expo center in Fredericksburg. He comes in, brings a boatload of books to sign later. But instead of the local guy saying, and I want to introduce to you 3-time Super Bowl winning champion, Joe Gibbs, right? I mean, I'm certainly that there was elements of that in there, but that wasn't his intro person. There was a young man that steps up, and I forget the play. He used to play for him. Joe Gibbs 2.0, right? When Joe Gibbs came back, gosh, his name will come to me. And he introduces himself. And he says, look, when I was a player, I didn't believe in myself. I wasn't sure. And here's a guy that came in. He had all the accolades, was already a Hall of Fame coach. And the first thing he did is he believed in everybody in that locker room. And he gave us his values and what he cared about and what he wanted to see from us. And it wasn't like he was a softie, but he was clear on what it was that what he expected. He was clear on expectations. But because he believed in me, and I wasn't sure I believed in myself, I chased that. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And we only went to one playoff. We won one playoff game under him. This is, again, Gibbs 2.0 era. But I'm still with him. So I've got him. I'm working on other things in his ministry. And when he called me to see if I'd want to do this. And there was nothing more than I knew it right then. And what's really cool is the following that you have, right? Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that followership where folks will just step in. When Gibbs came back 2.0, he brought in a lot of his old coaching staff. They had been retired themselves. And they all came in. They're like, yeah, let's go. Let's suit them up. Let's do it. And so I love seeing that with leaders. I told you before when I met Coach Boone and all those players around him, and I mentioned that I went to a crosstown school, and he got all excited about it and was talking about a player on my school's team, Rocky Belk, and how they stopped him. And I saw all those players kind of crowd around Coach Boone as if they're ready to strap it back on and go. I mean, these guys were years past playing, definitely. But that's what a great leader does. And they're like, yeah, coach, I hear you. You believe in me. I believe in you. I'm going to follow you. So pretty powerful.
No, it is. I mean, it was people first with him. Just amazing guy. You know, I've never heard anything negative. I think he's just a guy who stayed true to it. You know, we talk about values all the time on this podcast. And he's just a guy that stayed true to his values. And that's the result, you know, and that's focus, it's clarity, it's commitment, you know, it's all those words that we kind of throw around. But here's a guy who grabbed a whole handful of them and just held on and said, no, man, I got my line in the sand. I'm not crossing it. I'm going to do what I need to do to get done what we need to get done. And, you know, did it at a high level. And I'm sure he's still doing that. You know, I'd love to kind of see what he's really up to today. You know, what's a day to day? I mean, he's over 80 years old. I think he's 82, right? And probably still acting like a young man. Probably, you know, like you probably busy every day, you know, and pouring into those grandkids. 82, maybe he's even got some great grandkids by now. But I just know because the man he was, I'm sure he's pouring into those grandkids, you know, who are you know, missing their father and have for years. You know, not to be able to replace them, but I'm sure he stepped in and did everything he could to be a mentor, a leader, and a father figure for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful. And I'm just thankful for men like him. I mean, there's other great coaches. John Wooden, obviously a great coach, and we've talked about some of the college basketball coaches. Just the impact that they've made. And Tony Dungy wrote the foreword for this book, right? Game Plan for Life. I love Tony Dungy. I love his book, Mentor Leader.
Great book.
You and I and others have been talking about the importance of mentorship. I mean, that's really the call for me as we're kind of thinking about this, and maybe as we land the plane and tip and challenge, be a mentor for somebody. So we get an opportunity. There are people all around us who have the potential of leadership.
Well stated.
And they don't even know it. And we may not even recognize it. But what if you could? What if you could see the potential? Like, they may not have it now, but there's the Joe Jacobys out there that just somebody needs to believe in and get some direction, maybe some redirection, and they can step up. There's some opportunities where people just need to share despite how they are feeling emotionally, the Gary Clarks of the world, and they just need to vent a little bit. But you know what? Take the high road, right? What did our friend Fu say? Pause, just allow that process.
Oh, the value of the pause, right?
Yeah.
Thought about it.
And that calm, cool, collective leader, that's who we all want to follow. And that's who we can be. We're called to be that kind of leader. And I just love this thing. And of course, Joe, as I mentioned, he's a person of faith. He says, there's a quote here that I think is good. And I just want to honor Joe and his faith just for a moment. But he says, you and I are the players. Barry, you, me, everybody listening, watching, you're players. You're players in this game of life. And he says this, God's our head coach. God is our head coach. And we're all playing the biggest game of all.
Yeah.
And what he's talking about is recognize the purpose that we're given in this world, right? What we can do. And man, if we seize that, wow, let's go mentor people.
Well, that's the potential, right? And it's two-way street. What's our potential, and how do we draw and cultivate the potential in others? And I love, you kind of stealing my tip and challenge here, getting into the idea of mentorship. There's somebody in your life, you heard me a couple of weeks ago, me, you, and 15 other guys, hanging out for a week at 9,000 feet in the Colorado Rockies. And I gave them the same challenge. I said, guys, man, there's somebody in your life. There's somebody out there that just needs you to be that mentor, to be someone who's going to believe in them, to be someone who can help them build their confidence. And like you just mentioned, man, they're out there, right? And who's going to give them the opportunity to live into who they were created to be? And sometimes we can be that person. It doesn't take a lot, but man, just to be at the awareness, to see those opportunities, man, that's what it's all about. They're there every day. I promise you, everybody listening right now, this is not a critical statement. We're all in the same boat, but it's just the reality. We miss opportunities to add value to others every single day, just because we're focused, we're distracted by the noise and clutter. I'll save this for the wrap up, but just the opportunities are out there.
Yeah, the opportunities. I mean, it's just powerful. Speaking of opportunities, this is an interesting little tidbit about Joe Gibbs that's worth mentioning. Joe Gibbs, I mean, he had a passion for the game, a physical education degree or whatever it was. But when he went to Cornell, and maybe Cornell wasn't yet in the NFL, I can't remember where it was at this point. He goes to Cornell and he volunteers to help out. He volunteered. I went and volunteered with Dan Cornell, who was a big part of my past and a great coach. And of course, that's where it starts. Sometimes that's all we need to do is look for the opportunity to serve. When you look for the opportunity to serve, you find your purpose. When you find your purpose, you discover the impact that you can make. And that's what happened with Joe Gibbs.
And that reminds me of a quote. You business folks out there will recognize the name Peter Drucker. One of my favorite Peter Drucker quotes is, the best way to create the future, or the best way to predict the future, is to create it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, it's out there to do. And so many of us, myself included, right, have a tendency to just kind of let life happen to us. We got to go out and happen to life. I mean, it's just the only way we're going to live into that potential. If we're going to let life happen to us, then there's going to be no value added to the other person. There's going to be nobody we're mentoring. There's going to be, because we're just sitting around waiting to see what happens. And so that intentionality, again, being at that level of awareness to identify those opportunities and make it, take action. What's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody be like, man, I'm not interested. Well, okay, I tried. But what if, right? What if? You are that person who propelled. They're getting another guy he played under, John McKay. Man,
yeah.
Huge coach. Think about the career there.
Yeah.
Goodness. And so he had some great mentors. And he's been able to bring that. Arkansas coach, Frank Broyles, another guy. I mean, he had some incredible mentors in his life. And I don't have the whole list of people that played under him, like we do with so many coaches. But, I know there's a long list of guys who've gotten a huge amount of value from him. And we can be that person. It's easy to see it in the big sports spotlight, because it's on, the stats on the halftime and the commercial breaks and everything else. But it's no different for us. We can have the same kind of impact with the people around us. And it doesn't have to be on a big playing field. But like you said earlier, we are on the biggest playing field, the playing field of life.
Yeah.
And we need to have a game. And for those of you, definitely speaking to the faith-based audience right now, if you want a good book to read, been around a while, but the principles are still solid. Game Plan for Life by Joe Gibbs. Awesome book, awesome read. Highly recommended.
Super good. Super good. And one of the things to your point here, as we kind of land the plane, Gibbs says that everybody needs a coach.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a coach. And it really begs the question, who's your coach? And then it begs another question, who are you coaching?
Yep.
You're a coach. Be a coach. Find a coach. So we need that. So you just mentioned it. Gibbs had coaches for him that shaped him.
Yep.
He became a coach that shaped others. Who are we going to shape?
Yeah.
So
who are we going to shape? And then who, are we going to educate, equip, and empower them to mentor others, to coach others? This is when we talk about legacy, this is what we're talking about. What kind of impact are you going to leave after you're gone? I want my kids to be able to do some of that stuff. I want my grandkids to be doing things that I'm doing and do them well.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to do that unless I'm willing to pour into them while I have the opportunity. Hey, look, we don't ever know. We don't know when our number's up.
Yeah.
So you got to take advantage of what's there now, and I just encourage everybody, live into who you were created to be. Really, that's the end of the day. That's what you got. That's what you're going to leave behind.
For sure. So we're going to invite everybody, check us out. Go to the breakingaverage.com website. Check out some of the resources there, some other podcasts that we have, and different resources. Barry, I want to make sure I highlight your book, Leadership by Invitation. I think that's a perfect pitch, if you will, if you don't mind me doing this, because we are invited to lead. In this call, we were talking about Joe Gibbs, and he's a phys ed teacher.
Yep.
All right.
But he did get his master's.
Yeah, but he's changed lives. Yeah. Changed lives, right? We're called. We're invited to lead. So I think that's so powerful. I love what you talked about. Engage, equip, empower. That's so cool. But let's have some fun here. 3 Super Bowl wins. I know already you like the one where they lost against the Raiders. I got it. But let's talk about the big wins here, right? So they beat Miami. John Riggins had the Diesel had that great run. Oh, by the way, that's a great story too. Riggo, he's gone AWOL, right? And he says, I'm broken, I'm back, and Gibbs takes him back. The prodigal son returns.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe Riggo.
Yeah. And shaped Riggo had a Hall of Famer. Yeah. He probably would not have been a Hall of Famer under any other coach, to be honest.
Well, he might have fit in with Madden and the Raiders.
Maybe. I'm just saying there's very few that could tolerate that, right?
Yep.
So, but again, Miami. So that's first Super Bowl I'll mention. Then the second Super Bowl was against Denver, and they were down by a bunch. Yeah. And they came back. Not Dexter Manley. Doug Williams gets banged up, hurts his knee. Schrader comes in and goes to the Raiders a couple seasons later. Schrader lasts maybe till halftime, I don't know, and then Williams comes back out either in the second half or
and there's a whole nother story behind that one. We don't have to get into it, but that was that was interesting.
And so they just clobbered the Broncos.
Yeah.
And the Denver quarterback, John Elway, just doesn't look like he's ever going to get that Super Bowl. Of course, he did later. And then the third one is against the team that just couldn't win. Of course, the Washington team did well, but Buffalo, I don't know 4 times they get to the Super Bowl and they can't win it. But they beat them in Minnesota with Mark Rippon as the quarterback. So you had Joe Theismann, you had Doug Williams, and you had Mark Rippon. Which of those 3 Super Bowls was the most spectacular of the 3?
Well, I got to go with the middle one, and I feel as much as I'm, the fact that Marino never won, that's a bummer. Great quarterbacks, you hope they at least get that one, right?
Yep.
You look at these guys that won with the Washington football team. I'm gonna get this down, man. The vernacular. I want to say, but I'll be politically correct. But I definitely got to go with the Doug Williams one. It was a big deal when he made that draft. Now, keep in mind, at that time, to choose a lower level, as far as stats and ratings and exposure and what you might call social media at that point in time, it was an unlikely pick to pick him over, from Grambling, to pick some big names, for big schools. Everybody's like, what? What do you do? But Gibbs went with the right people, in his mind.
Yeah. What was cool about that, just so you know, Williams was with Tampa Bay, and he asked Bobby Beathard, "Hey, I want this guy," because Gibbs was at Tampa for a bit, and under I forget the coach there. It'll come to me.
Was it McKay?
McKay.
Yeah.
And he believed, he had 100% belief in Doug Williams, and nobody else did. Yeah. And so they go and they do a trade. They pull him in. He's a Redskin, or excuse me, Washington football team player. Did it.
Busted.
Yep. Sorry, guys. Beep. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. And that's first African American quarterback
drafted in the first round.
Amazing.
We talked about early on, Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. There's so many examples after that of the color barrier getting broken. And there's another one. First African American quarterback drafted in the first round. Thank you, Joe Gibbs. Look at man. I mean, good grief, the list is so long. But that victory, you mentioned him getting a little banged up and Jay Schrader coming in, and at halftime it was, there was some emotion in there,
Yeah.
and it was his team. It was Doug Williams' team, and he said, "No, I got this." And he went out there in the second half, and he just owned the rest of that game. And I think he made a statement, certainly on behalf of him and everything he represented, but he just went out and made a statement. And I think he was able to do that because of his coach, because of what Joe Gibbs did to empower him and give him the confidence to say, this is my team, this is my game, and I got this. And he went out there and proved it. So I think, with that, not that I don't like Rippon and then Theismann and the stories there, but it's just, there's a real story, and I think what Doug Williams did in that game and in his career is really a great representation of what Joe Gibbs' belief and anybody's belief can do for someone. So I gotta pull that one down as my number one Redskins.
It was a
Washington football team Super Bowl victory.
All right, we've done it a few times. It's okay, guys. So
Sorry.
forgive us, audience, for our slip of the former name of the Washington football team. But we're not using the new name because I have not bought into it.
Do they have a new name now?
What is it?
I don't know. I thought they were changing it again. That's all right.
I hope so. I hope so. One more little there's so many great players, the Dexter Manley, how he handled that, of course, but Darrell Green.
Yeah, another great
little guy that why would you get this guy from Texas A&M or whatever school he went to, kind of last pick in the draft? Wasn't part of the Miami Super Bowl win, I don't think. But man, he was amazing. Why? Gibbs believed in him, and he knew his strengths quickly. He learned strengths of those around him, and he puts them in their areas of strength.
Yeah.
So, well, dude, this has been awesome. Love talking about football. Love talking about this coach, this man, Joe Gibbs. Joe, we would love to have you on the Breaking Average podcast. Why? Because you broke average as a coach, as an owner in NASCAR, in life. And thank you for giving us a game plan that we all can live by. So,
and he has mentored and equipped and empowered others to break average and continue to do so. And that legacy will live on. People will be talking about Joe Gibbs and what he did in both football and NASCAR racing forever. He's iconic in those areas. Again, only guy in both Hall of Fames. Only guy in those two Hall of Fames.
Amazing.
Got a planet, but like almost 8 billion people now. There's one in the NFL Hall of Fame, and the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Mr. Joe Gibbs.
And he's got a degree in PE.
Who'd have thunk?
All right. Well, thanks guys for watching. Barry, this has been awesome.
Dude, I'm telling you, I want to leave you on this point, right? I want to leave you and share one more quote.
I'm ready.
So here's kind of my tip, right? And it's not my tip, it's actually Joe's tip. Key to being a good manager, a good entrepreneur, is to pick the right people. Pick the right people, and they'll make you look good. All right. Now, it's not necessarily self-serving, but that's getting the right people on the bus and putting them in the right seats. And I think that's, honestly, if you're someone who wants to add value to others, I think that's kind of our responsibility. When we talk about going through the game of life, well, okay, that's a big bus, right? But we got to get on it. We got to get the right people on our bus, our journey, right? Get them in the right seats. Who's pouring into value into us? Who's mentoring us? Who's giving us a checkup from the neck up? And who are we doing that for? And so the challenge, same challenge I gave you and those other guys, a couple of weeks ago, is find that person in your life. And I'm not talking necessarily about your kid or your brother, your sibling, or somebody at work, somebody that, you're supposed to be doing that. Raise your level of awareness and go out that person will come into your life. Trust me.
Yes.
They will come into your life when you're operating at a little higher level of awareness. That person will come into your life. Take the time to be a mentor to them, to be a coach to them, to add value to them, to encourage, educate, equip, empower. They need you. Who are we to take that away from someone? If God's going to put that opportunity in front of us, we need to act on it. So there's my challenge, man. Go out and make a difference with somebody that you may not even know yet.
I love it. Very fantastic. Well said. And I'm inspired, man. I'm inspired. Guys, thanks again for watching. Check us out on the web, and share this with others. Be a subscriber. Tell others to subscribe. We would love to hear from you. And if you know Joe, tell him, hey, I know a guy named Paul and Barry. They would love to chat with you.
Definitely. Take care, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.